We are continuing on a series today that is called FAQ, which is Frequently Asked Questions. And it's if you're a first-time visitor or you're first time here as a guest, it's kind of unique because normally we like to be able to take a particular passage and just really kind of look and go deep and learn more about what God has to say. And this particular series was kind of maybe in the summer, maybe just sometimes there's questions. I've had people approach me with questions that just never seem to get answered. And they really kind of want to know. And so we're just kind of going through a series of different questions just to be able to, and questions that came from people who filled out a form or a little note that they've had or that I've had in the past. And just really take a look at some of those things and kind of find out what does the Bible say about this. Hopefully maybe that we learn for ourselves ways to be able to go into God's Word ourselves and be able to discover answers to whatever questions, because every day you're going to get questions. That being said then, I want to reemphasize what I said last week, which it's important to understand kind of when you're looking for answer to a question, how the process of seeking that answer. And first of all, it's to look for a direct answer from the Bible. We talk about the Bible being God's holy word, and so therefore God speaks to things, and sometimes they're very direct. For example, and this was a question someone had asked once before about salvation. Is Jesus really the only way? Well, John 14:16, Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Acts 4:12 says, "Salvation is found in no one else, for there's no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved." Those are direct answers to that question, to where there's really no room to say, yeah, but, because that's what the Bible very clearly speaks. Sometimes the Bible, though, isn't that direct, particularly in technology and stuff, and when you look at it. And so then we look for principles in the Bible that a lot of times there are principles that you look throughout the whole Bible, because even a direct statement Satan used, for example, when he tempted Jesus, he took a statement from the Bible and twisted it. And so, obviously you've got to be cautious when you look at that. And so you take a statement and then you also look for principles. If the statement's not there, even more important that you look at truths or principles that are taught throughout the Bible that really re-emphasize, because God's not going to say one thing on this in the Old Testament and another in the New Testament and contradict himself. And so we look for principles that maybe carry forward and help us understand what the answer would be. And given, if there's still not clarity, then it comes down to sometimes it's just, my interpretation or my opinion, and which sometimes, obviously, we can have different interpretations, and that's okay. Certainly in the issues that are not essential, if you will, like the previous one about salvation. But you find that, and that's why you find churches sometimes with different doctrinal positions, because they've kind of taken something and they've interpreted in maybe a little different way. And if I do that as we talk, then I'll try to say, hey, this is my opinion, and do the best I can to be able to take a look at that. Last week, we focused on questions that dealt with contentment, financially, and just possessions, and the pursuits, and some of those things that were in the area of contentment. If you didn't hear that and you want to, you can go online and you can listen to it on there, but that was a subject last week. Today we're going to talk about moral questions. I know that's why we have a large attendance, because it's like, oh man, moral questions, yeah! The word moral is defined as this: pertaining to or concerned with the principles or rules of right conduct, or the distinction between right and wrong, ethical. So, that in itself is just distinguishing, like I said, the right and wrong, but it doesn't necessarily fully help us to understand what moral issues or questions would be. Also, I want to be able to say that, be honest and say, no one asked me in this last several weeks a moral question. Now, either that's because you've got it all figured out, or no one really wants to know the answer to a moral question, which is probably more the latter, because that means like, oh boy, yeah, fine. It's like going to the doctor when you feel sick, but I'd rather not know than go and find out, oh yeah, I am sick, So maybe that's the issue. But I really felt it's still important to do, and I've had over the course of this last year issues and questions that have come up that I kind of drew from it. But I felt it's important because we face moral issues all the time. I mean, we're this, Proposition 8 and issues of homosexuality, abortion, euthanasia, all these things, addictions, various things, whether people are, live together, have sex outside of marriage. I mean, you could go on and on and on. It's all over the place. So for us not even to want to think about it, we're just missing a valuable opportunity to really say, what does the Bible say about these kind of things. For us even to personally try to say, God, what does God have to say about this issue that maybe I'm wrestling with? And so my hope today is that, well, I've got 4 or 5 questions that we're going to answer. I'll give you a quick answer. More importantly, my hope is that we can gain some principles and a process where every one of us can go through to be able to say, I wonder what God has to say about this issue. Because we are driving throughout the day, constantly facing Him, it's important that we have that ability to guide ourselves, allow God to guide us through those moral questions that we face. So let me get started by talking about this. Where to set the bar when it comes to morality? I gave you the definition of what morality was, but that's not necessarily enough, because society has a standard of morality, but that standard changes. Now, a lot of you maybe aren't in my day, but if you saw the Dick Van Dyke Show back in the day, I mean, the thought of the two of them being in a double or queen size or even a California king, no way. They had 2 twin beds, if you remember, because there's no way you're going to have a man and a woman in bed together on TV. If you watch commercial about intimate apparel, it was cartoons. You would never have a live person wearing intimate apparel on national TV. Unheard of. And then there's plenty of other issues. But now, look at TV today and say we kind of got past all that, didn't we? I mean, the bar has continued to lower down when we've kind of looked at it. And so the society standard is kind of that way, is that it'll have a standard, but it moves. God, on the other hand, has a standard of morality that He describes in the Bible too, and it's called holiness. To God, His standard never changes. When He has a bar of holiness, this is the bar of holiness. The 10 Commandments is still the 10 Commandments. It's not obsolete. It's not out of date. It's not, well, now it's 9. Because that one, I just kind of tossed it. No. It's God's standard is always God's standard, and it never changes. And so we have to look at that and say, we've got society's moral standard to look at, and then we've got God's moral standard. And for us to wrestle with this is to really look at it and say, which standard are we going to follow? Where do we fall as it relates to God's standard? I used to say, we're great as Christians because we look at society and we know that if we're a little better, we feel good about ourselves. It's like the stock market when it tumbles. As long as you're looking at one worse than you feel good. But God's standard, the gap between us and God can sometimes really increase because we're not looking at the right standard. We're just comparing to, well, we're not society, so hey, I'm doing okay. When we're seeing a gap. And so, really some of us and all of us need to really come and have an honest conversation with God and say, where am I when it comes to your moral standards? How much have I drifted away from that? Leviticus 11:44 says this. God said, be holy because I'm holy. Be holy because I'm holy. That's the bar that God says. That's the bar that He set for Christians to be able to hold to. So the first question I throw out is this idea, does it matter really that standard? I know God says that. I know society. How much does it matter to us whether it is? And I'm going to use a couple of questions that we're given that kind of put in here. One question was written this way. It says, what happens to people who are basically really good, kind people, but they don't believe in God or actively seek Him out? Will they go to heaven when they die? What happens to people who live a morally standard life as it compares to society, but maybe they're not at the standard of what God, or they don't live to what God would say because they don't believe in Him? Where do they lie? Well, Scripture speaks to that when it talks about Romans 3:28 says this, a man is justified by faith apart from the observing the law. It's kind of this way. I heard someone explain it this way. We can live a morally centered life in society standards, and I can be good to you, and you can be good to me, and horizontally, we're really above the bar as it relates to people. But all of that speaks nothing to my vertical relationship with God. So what? If I'm in a relationship with my wife in marriage, and yet I says, how can you be complaining about me as a husband? Man, I'm nice to Mike, I'm nice to Pat, I'm nice to all these people out here. I do nice things, I open the door for people. I don't get it. Her response would be, yeah, but what about for me?